So at the Quag Wildlife Refuge, we've been a refuge since 1934. And if you haven't visited us here, I do want to go over a few different things. So our mission is always to serve the land, make sure we're responsible stewards, and we want to educate people. So we try our best to make sure we keep the land and the animals safe here at the refuge and continue to share our knowledge with everyone here. So if you haven't visited us in person, the Quag Wildlife Refuge is located on the south shore of Long Island. We're over kind of near where it forks. And then this is a picture of our nature center currently. So actually right now is a really exciting time at the refuge. We're just starting a really big renovation project that I would like to share with you guys really quick. So we're starting to expand our nature center. So actually currently right now I'm in a satellite building that we are working out of until we can get the um, until we can get the renovation done. So we've been doing a lot of fundraising. This is our capital campaign project. Basically, we're going to be expanding the Nature Center back and up so that we have more education spaces and more area for staff to be kind of out of the way so we can really use our space more wisely, and we'll be able to do more for our animals and really be able to give everyone that comes to visit the best quality visit that they possibly can get. So if you're coming to visit and you wanted to go for a hike, we have over 7 miles of hiking trails. But currently we are dealing with some trail closures, unfortunately due to the southern pine beetle, but we are still working on getting some of that fixed up. So there's still plenty of space to go for a walk. There's just some areas that we keep people out of to make sure that they stay safe. And then we're open 365 days a year from sunrise to sunset. And I think it's really great that you can always come to visit, and it's always something new and exciting here at the refuge. So we do have some resident animals here if you wanted to come visit. We have some permanently injured wildlife, and then we also house some animals that people could no longer take care of. So these are animals that people had as pets and then came to us and we were able to keep them in our care. So we have outside some sulcata tortoises, and then in our satellite building right now, we have reptiles. So hopefully we'll be able to have that open for you guys to come visit soon. And then we also have across the way Fairydale Boardwalk, which I'm not sure if everyone that comes to visit knows of. So if you ever have any questions on trying to find it, we can always point you in the right direction, but it's just right over the train tracks and it's a really beautiful place to go for a walk. And then we house a lot of educational programs. Right now, we're doing a lot virtually and outside. So always stay tuned. Check our website for any upcoming events, or if you're signed up for our emails, you'll get any new stuff coming in. So it's really exciting. So we'll jump right into it. What is a snake? Let me just see really quick. What do you guys think? Or I'm sure you guys all know, since you're here, you know what a snake is, right? So snakes are reptiles, and I feel like not everyone knows what the difference between a reptile is from other animals. So reptiles are animals that have scales, and generally we like to classify them against mammals, which mammals have fur. They have they give live birth. They will feed their babies, and reptiles don't have all those things. They have scales. They're going to be cold-blooded, which is ectothermic. So they really depend on their the outside heat to be able to regulate their body temperature. So we get our heat from inside of us, and they get their heat from their environment. They are vertebrates just like us, and they have a lower metabolism. So they don't use their energy in their bodies to stay warm. They actually have to eat less because they conserve more energy. They can use anything that they eat to be able to help them to heal or grow instead of having to keep themselves warm. So I'm going to give you guys a little bit of a quiz. So let me ask you guys if you think if this is a snake. Oops, I'm sorry. Again, I'm like really since we already saw this is not a snake. This is a Sicilian. This is a legless amphibian that we can find. The closest is Central America, but Africa and Southern Asia. So trying to compare the different animals that may be confused with snakes. So let's go on to the next one. This one I won't click on. We think this could be a snake. Any guesses? I have some guesses. This isn't a snake. This is a legless lizard, and these can be found pretty widely around the world. So North America, South America, Europe, Asia, and Australia. So this guy is actually a gecko, but they usually he's a Delma enormata or olive legless lizard, but technically he's a gecko from Australia. So he's kind of cool looking. And we'll learn how to spot the differences in a moment. So, all right. This one I think you guys should know, right? Obviously, this is a worm. It's an invertebrate, doesn't have a skeletal structure, doesn't shed, sometimes can be mistaken. We'll learn a little bit more about that shortly. But we can find worms pretty much everywhere, except for Antarctica, which is kind of cool. What about this guy? What do we think? This one's a little bit harder. All right. This one is a snake. So snakes are found on every continent except for Antarctica. And this snake I wanted to include because it is a worm snake. So it's a little confusing to see when you're like, wait, we just saw a worm. That looks like a worm. So this one's endemic to the United States. And this one we'll actually learn about because it is from New York. So what are some differences from snakes to lookalikes? So as we can see, snakes do not have eyelids. They don't have ear openings. So that was kind of a difference between the snakes and the legless lizard. They have scales. Snakes will have forked tongues, and then there are vertebrates. So legless lizards are similar, but they have eyelids. So that's one of the big differences. And they also have ear openings. So that's like how you would be able to tell if they weren't flicking their tongue around to be able to see. And then the Sicilians, they're going to be an amphibian, so they're not going to have the scales. They might or may not, but they really don't have a lot of characteristics the same other than them being kind of like the same shape. So this is a little bit more of a way to tell the difference between the legless lizard and the snake. So you can see the external ear holes. Their tail's going to be quite a bit longer, which is going to be hard for us to see if we're not observing them up close and personal. But just being able to tell from the eyes and the ear holes that the differences between the two. So some physical characteristics, just kind of reiterating that snakes, they don't have limbs. So unlike a lot of other reptiles, snakes don't have any legs or arms. They don't have eyelids or external ear holes, but they can still hear and their eyes are still protected. They have a forked tongue and they use that to smell their environment. And they have scales all over their body. So that helps protect them and helps them with movement. So a little bit of anatomy for snakes. So inside of a snake, just to kind of get an idea of how it all fits in there. I always think it's interesting because snakes actually only have one functioning lung, and it's usually the right one. And if they do have a left lung, it's usually just there kind of left over from when they were kind of turning into snakes. So it's pretty cool to see how everything kind of fits in their body. And then something I feel like not a lot of people think about either is actually their skeletal structure. So they have so many vertebrae and so many ribs that actually help them move along. And then you could see their tail, how it is so much different than their the rest of their body, just having just the vertebra. And then this is one of the head to just give you the closer up because it's hard to see with the skin and scales. Their lower jaw is actually disconnected, and that allows them to be able to eat the larger prey items. So, how do they eat? Sometimes snakes eat differently. So we have some snakes that are going to be ambush hunters, which they're going to be kind of hunkering down, waiting to either smell, sense, or see prey, and they'll be able to go and grab it. We have hunters that are going to be more active. They're going to be going around and trying to actively hunt their prey. Um, so they're going to be smelling around, kind of like tracing things, and typically they're going to be thinner bodied snakes because they can move around a little bit faster. We have constrictors, so snakes. When I was younger, I always thought a lot of snakes were more constrictors, which generally they're going to grab them and then they're going to wrap their body around them and squeeze them until they are no longer alive so that they can swallow their prey. But contrary to that, a lot of snakes will also eat things completely alive. They just grab it and then start swallowing it. Some snakes will use venom, and the venom will either help immobilize the prey or actually aid in digestion. And then all snakes will swallow their prey whole. So they have that really flexible jaw that's able to open up, and they're able to just kind of unhinge and allow, they'll use their fangs or their teeth to just walk their food down into their throat so they can swallow it. So I talked about how some will smell with their tongue. So they actually will use their tongues, they'll flick them out, and they'll be able to collect particles in the air to be able to decipher what is in their environment. And they'll actually move it up into this Jacobson's organ that is in the roof of their mouth, which they'll be able to interpret with their brain. And then I wanted to show you guys this, I thought was a really cool picture of a snake. They used some mist or steam to be able to see how the tongue was moving. So it gives you that real visual of how they can smell basically in stereo because they can pinpoint in which direction the smell is actually coming from with that forked tongue. So snakes also will grow throughout their whole entire life. They usually will shed their skin 4 to 12 times a year, and it varies based on age. So younger snakes are gonna shed quite a bit more than adult snakes, and it also depends on how much they're eating throughout the year. But this also helps them to remove parasites. So if they had any ticks or mites on them, when they shed, they should be able to get rid of all of those at the same time. So there are a few different scale types. There's the two most common are keeled and smooth scales. And to be able to get a good look at it, the keeled scales are going to have a rough ridge down the center of each scale, which gives them a really like matted, rough look to them. They have some weakly keeled scales, so it's going to be a little less shiny, kind of in between. And then the unkeeled scales, they have no ridge on them. They're smooth and very shiny, so they will have a little bit more of a sheen to them. Um, oh, I'm sorry. And then with the scales, it's interesting because the keeled scales with that rougher texture, it will give them a little bit more of an advantage with climbing and terrestrial movement, so moving around on the ground. The smooth scales will help a little bit more reduce drag. They can be better swimmers, and it gives them a little less friction. The keeled scales also will help them with camouflage because they're going to look a little duller. They're not going to stand out as much in their environment. So, locomotion. our snakes have to move somehow without legs and arms. So there's a few different ways. Um, the concertina, it is more of like an accordion shape. So they're gonna scrunch their body and slowly move up and down. The serpentine, which everyone's really used to seeing, is in that S-shaped slithering motion. Sidewinding, snakes will use if they're on any loose or slippery substrates. And then the reticular is a specialized movement that is pretty much just to snakes. And they'll use this to move almost silently through any sort of environment. And they're moving as straight as possible. So we have reproduction. All of our snakes are internal fertilizers. We have some that lay eggs, so they're oviparous, and they just lay the eggs and they'll leave. They'll keep them in an area that is habitable for the eggs to be able to be incubated. Um, Ovi Oviviparous is where the mom actually keeps the eggs inside of her body until they're ready to hatch, and then they'll come out fully out of the egg. And then there's viviparous, which is just like us, they give birth to live young and they have a placenta. So it's kind of interesting to think that snakes could also do that too. So now that we have one more section, I'm sorry. Then we have brumation, which is something that all reptiles and will do. This is their version of hibernation, and basically, it's similar to hibernation in the fact that they're kind of hunkering down in the colder months, but they will every once in a while come up out in warmer weather to be able to warm up or maybe find some food. Um, they also use a different storage system, so they'll use glycogen for energy instead of fat deposits like mammals will. And it's triggered by, similarly to mammals, the shorter days and the temperature changes. So they'll hang out there until they can get to some warmer some warmer days. And then also, I'm sorry, this picture down here, both these pictures, these are hibernaculas. And a lot of snakes will actually hibernate in a communal den. Sometimes they'll be mixed with other species and or other amphibians or reptiles. And garter snakes are pretty commonly found in large hibernaculas. So it's pretty interesting to be able to find one of those. So we've made it to now our individual snake species. So New York State has 17 species, only 3 are venomous. Um, and then Long Island has 11, and all the ones that live on Long Island are non-venomous. So the snakes of Long Island. We have one that I think a lot of us have seen outside is our common garter snake. And fortunately, their conservation status is least concern. They like to live in the edges of woodlands, farms, and grassy fields, and they really adapted to our urban environments, so they can live pretty well with us. They can change, I mean, they can have a lot of different variants and colors, but usually we'll see them in these colorways, and typically you'll see them with that stripe. And they usually are around 16 to 30 inches long. These guys are going to be active mostly during the day. And like I said before, they're kind of social for reptiles. They can be found in large numbers when they're either hibernating or when they're mating. And these guys are pretty proficient at swimming and climbing. So it's pretty cool to see them kind of traverse through their environment. These guys are going to be eating earthworms and amphibians, and usually they'll eat some frogs. And their defense mechanism, if you were to encounter them, they're gonna flatten their body. They might try to strike if you get them cornered. Um, a lot of snakes, and same thing with this guy, they're gonna emit a foul smelling musk and probably defecate. But if they're basking in the sun and they see you, they're probably going to flee because they have a little bit more energy to get away from everybody. Um, so I was saying they're a little bit more communal when they're mating. They can be found in mating balls, which is like a whole lot of snakes kind of can join together. Um, and this can last several days to continue for the courtship to happen. And they're ovoviviparous, so they're going to have eggs inside of their bodies until they hatch. And then to show you the range. Garter snakes got their name common garter snakes because they're pretty common. You'll see them kind of all over the place in New York, but also they're very common throughout the United States of America. So they have a pretty large range. So we have our Eastern ribbon snake, and these guys are globally ranked as secure, um, but it does face significant regional declines, specifically in the northern United States and Canada, where they've been having more problems with their population numbers. These guys will often be found near well-vegetated wetlands, marshes, bogs, and edges of ponds and streams and lakes, but they want to usually be in some sort of coverage. They're pretty slender. They're 16 to 35 inches long. And these guys are defined by their dorsal stripes. So these stripes running up and down their bodies. Um, they actually have like a pretty long tail for a snake, so it's about 1/3 of their body compared to that diagram I showed before. These guys have a pretty long snake tail. And then another defining characteristic is this white scale right in front of their eye. These guys are going to be primarily out during the day, and they're semi-aquatic, so they're really proficient swimmers. And these guys will mainly eat frogs, tadpoles, and small fish, which they're just going to grab and swallow whole and swallow alive. These guys are also viviparous, so they're going to be giving live birth. They're not going to be laying any eggs anywhere, which I think is pretty cool. So this was a picture Evan Rigel had taken at the refuge, and it's a ribbon snake eating a little toadlet, but we thought it was kind of cool to see him getting a snack out in the wild, especially out here. You don't see them too often, but so in New York State, they are distributed pretty widely throughout the state. And they definitely occur here on Long Island pretty frequently. And then in the United States, it's the ribbon snake. There we go. Sorry. Um, they're widely spread on the East Coast. So they've got a pretty big range. So our northern water snake, these guys are also least concern. Um, they like to hang out by various moving bodies of water. Um, these guys are often mistaken for venomous cottonmouths and copperheads because of their coloration and their splashing pattern. We'll see the copperheads later on in the PowerPoint, but they do have that similar blotching. So if you try to think of, oops, sorry, this pattern here. It's kind of similar on some other snakes, which unfortunately gets them confused with them. But they can get up to 2 to 4 feet in size, with the females generally being bigger than the males. Um, Although they're confused with those venomous snakes, they're non-venomous. They're also semi-aquatic, and they'll hunt day and night. They're not constrictors, so they're going to just grab and swallow their prey. And these guys are active during the day during the cooler weather, like spring and fall, and then at night during the summertime. Um, and I thought it was pretty cool to learn that they can stay underwater for up to 90 minutes while they're swimming around, which is a pretty long time. And they're very opportunistic with their feeding. They're going to eat fish, frogs, crayfish, and insects. And when they're threatened, their defensive mechanism is going to be flattening their heads and striking. They can also release a foul, musky smell. These guys are also viviparous, so they're going to be giving birth to live babies, no eggs. So these guys are located again, pretty big re range in New York, and then also, again, a really large range in the United States, which is pretty cool. They're gonna overlap with cottonmouths kind of in the south down here. We don't really see them too much up north. So the eastern milk snake, these guys are also least concern. Their habitat is pretty diverse with like damp forests, rocky hillsides, and they were found a lot in barns, and that's how they got their name, the milk snake. Farmers would actually think that they were going in to steal milk from the cows. Um, they have this beautiful checkered kind of pattern on um, their backs and bellies, and um, generally have like this whitish, reddish, blackish pattern. Um, these guys are going to be constrictors, and they're primarily nocturnal or crepuscular, um, which crepuscular just means dawn and dusk. And they are usually kind of hiding away. Um, so usually under like logs and leaves to be able to hide away. And they mostly eat rodents, snakes, lizards, and eggs. If they were threatened, they might vibrate their tail or release a foul odor, or if they are, again, cornered, they will maybe go to strike. And they are egg layers. And these guys will typically brumate in communal dens, again, like similar to the garter snake. So their range, pretty widespread in New York. And then their range in this is actually the dashed line area. So there is more there's southern milk snakes and then also the eastern milk snakes. So our eastern hognose snake, this one's a pretty characteristic or a fan favorite, if you want to say, um, here at the refuge. So the eastern hognose snake is of least concern, so their numbers are doing okay. These guys are found in pitch pine forests, scrub oak forests, oak forests, feel edges of forests. I know some people have found them kind of South Shore in sandy areas. They're 20 to 35 inches, so they don't get super big, but they're known for that upturned snout, which they use to be able to dig and to get prey items out from under the ground. These guys are mostly active during the day, so they're going to be diurnal. And their diet mostly consists of Fowler's toads or toads, sometimes salamanders, other frogs, sometimes small invertebrates. But their nose was designed specifically to be able to help them dig underground, and then they can actually wiggle out any toads kind of hanging out in the soil for them to pop up. And they actually have rear-facing fangs, so if a frog were to inflate while they were trying to swallow it, they can actually pop it. Um, they're also known for their defense mechanism. So these guys are pretty dramatic when it comes to trying to get away from any predators. So they will feign death, but they can also sometimes hiss and bluff strike. So they will just kind of bop their heads at whatever is scaring them. Um, and yeah, they do they're pretty it's kind of funny to see how traumatic they can be. But we have a Western hognose snake here at the refuge that someone had given us for educational programs. And yeah, he can be he'll sometimes when he's feeling sassy, he'll puff out his face and hiss, but he's a very good guy. So our next snake, oh, sorry, the range. So like I said, the kind of southeastern part of Long Island, we'll find them more generally, and then also kind of upstate New York. And then their range is pretty widespread eastern United States. Okay. So our smooth green snake, these guys are of least concern. They're usually found in moist grassy areas, prairies, meadows, marshes. And these guys are diurnal. They're going to be pretty docile. They're actually known for a unique swaying behavior. They'll mimic wind-blown grass to kind of camouflage into their environment. Um, they're very small and slender. They're about 12 to 26 inches, with females being longer. Um, it's kind of interesting because their green color is made up of a yellow and blue pigment. So when they pass away, the yellow pigment actually breaks down really fast, and they will be blue when they're deceased. So kind of interesting. Um, and these guys will sometimes get confused with a rough green snake. They're not here in New York, but if you were ever out in the country and you were seeing a snake, rough green snake is going to be keeled, where this one is a smooth keel. They don't have any keels on their scales, so they're very smooth. Rough green snake's going to be keeled, and then the rough green snake is usually hanging out in trees, where this guy's going to be more on the ground. Uh, they're exclusively insectivores, so they eat a lot of soft-bodied insects and spiders. And then pretty much for their defense mechanism, they're going to try to camouflage, they're going to freeze, or try to flee, maybe making a musky smell to get away. This is their New York range, so kind of mid-island has been spotted. And then the North American range for that snake. Okay, so our northern black racer is of least concern. These guys live on the edges of a lot of where forests meet and other terrains. They are often found near kind of like stony walls or other like rough edges. And they like to hang out in like sunny areas. So they're, as adults, solid, almost completely solid black. Um, they're very smooth, very shiny. They have a distinct white and gray chin. So that chin right there is to that species. Um, and when they're younger, they're going to look a lot different. I'll show you guys on the next slide. These guys are going to be up to 5 to 6 feet, or 36 to 60 inches. And they can often be confused with the eastern rat snake, which is kind of in the greater New York area. We're not going to see them here on Long Island. But these guys, since they're smooth, the rat snake is going to be that keeled scale snake. From their name, Black Racer, these guys are very active, fast-moving snakes, and they are able to kind of go around their environment in a lot of different ways. They're not constrictors. They're gonna just bite and swallow their prey, and their diet, as juveniles, pretty much consists of insects and spiders. With the adults, they're gonna be primarily consuming small mammals and reptiles. Um, when they're doing any sort of defense mechanism, they're gonna be trying to flee. That's their first instinct. For a lot of these snakes are going to try to flee. They can defecate, musk. They're going to either try to camouflage, If they're really trapped in a situation, they might try to vibrate their tail against any sort of leaves or anything like that to imitate a rattlesnake. And these guys will be laying eggs. So this is a juvenile, which looks quite a bit different than the adult. So this is one picture that we had someone had sent us from Ridge. They emailed us and they were like, I'm not sure what snake this is. So this is a juvenile. This is their typical coloration and patterns. And as they grow, they just become darker and darker. As an adult, you might see a faint pattern on their backs, but generally they are that black coloration. So black racers are pretty common sight here on Long Island. We'll see them kind of roaming around at the refuge quite often. And then in the United States, they have a pretty wide northeastern range, and there might be some overlapping with the southern black racer, but that's where they are at. So our northern ring-necked snake, they're of least concern. So and all of these numbers are coming from 2007. So there's still, a lot to be updated when it comes to reptile numbers, but iNaturalist, you can always see some recent sightings for any of these snakes that we talk about today too. So these guys are going to be in a moist shaded hardwood or kind of a mixed forest with plenty of places to hide. As you can see, they're really small guys. They're slender. They're 10 to 15 inches. And they have that characteristic yellow ring around their neck. And there is a southern ringneck, and they're going to have spots on their stomachs where these guys are not going to have those spots. These guys are nocturnal, so a little bit harder to find. Um, and they're gonna have a very mild venom. They're still safe to be around us. They're not going to affect us with their venom, but that helps them to be able to catch their prey. They're going to be eating small salamanders, and especially here, the red-backed salamander, earthworms, slugs, and other small insects. And their defense mechanism is usually to just curl their tail over to expose their underbelly, that bright coloration that should be a warning sign to many other animals. And then these guys will also be laying eggs. And then their range here in New York. And then for the United States, that blue section. And then you can see the crossover and also the southern ringneck, which I said they had the bellies, the spots on their bellies. Okay, now we have our northern brown snake, also known as decay snake. Um, these guys are of least concern. They're going to be in moist, covered environments, in the woodlands, wetlands, edge habitats. Um, but they can hang out in they can hang out in our gardens also, in parks and under other debris, kind of in more suburban areas. Um, they are pretty small, 8 to 15 inches. You can see their brown coloration with that stripe down their back. And they have a couple, the stripe and the spots down their back. And these guys are actually what we call fossorial. So they're going to be primarily underground. So it's going to be pretty hard for us to spot them unless usually heavy rains will bring any fossorial snakes out to the surface. Um, so again, pretty hard to find. They're going to be under any sort of debris if you were to come across them. These guys are going to be eating slugs, earthworms, snails, and other soft body insects. And if you were to encounter one, they would probably try to flatten their body and release a foul-smelling musk to get you away. And these guys are viviparous, so they are also going to be giving birth to live babies. This is the range map for New York. And then for the United States. So they have a really pretty wide range. Okay, this is one that I was pretty excited to show you guys. So the eastern worm snake. I know we weren't so sure if it was a worm, if it was a snake, what was going on with it. And it does look very similar to kind of like a little worm. It's pink. These guys are of least concern overall in the United States, but in New York State, they are of special concern. Um, these guys are going to be found in moist wooded areas. They're going to be fossorial also, so burrowing underground, hiding under rocks and leaf litter and logs. And by their name, they kind of look like a large earthworm. So brown or black sometimes, but with a pink belly, they have those smooth scales that give that sheen look and allow it to be able to kind of maneuver underground pretty easily. And they have those tiny eyes, and they actually have a pointed tail. And I'm sorry, I added this picture last to show you guys how small they are, but it did cover. They have like a hard spine tip on their tail, and they can actually use that in a defensive manner if they were feeling threatened. Um, but generally, they're just going to be releasing a foul, musky smell. Uh, their diet mostly consists of earthworms, slugs, and other soft-bodied insects. And they're oviparous, so they're going to be laying eggs. And this is their New York map. They're actually in a pretty small region of New York. And then this is the rest of the United States. Okay, so our northern red-bellied snake. And this is a least concern. So these guys are in moist, cool environments, forests with trees that are going to be losing their leaves and regrowing them every year, mixed woodlands, edges of forests, bogs, and generally they like to hang out under logs or other coverage. They're usually distinguished by the three dots kind of at the nape of their neck. Um, and they have that bright red orange belly. They're about 8 to 16 inches long. These guys are going to be pretty secretive. They're non-aggressive. They're going to be up at night, so they're nocturnal during the summer. But during the spring and fall, they can be out during the day. Their diet is mostly slugs, snails, earthworms, and they actually have teeth helped to design, I'm sorry, teeth that help them extract snails from their shells. So they're designed to help extract them from their shells to be able to eat them. If they are feeling threatened, they'll actually do a lip curl to reveal their teeth in their mouth. And they may also flatten their heads and bodies to make them look bigger. And that foul musk, a lot of the times snakes will release that. These guys are going to be viviparous, so they're also going to be giving birth to live young. This is their New York map region. And their United States region. So, okay. Now we're on to the snakes of New York, the larger area of New York. So these ones are not going to be found on Long Island. These are going to be found upstate. So still pretty cool. So this is that black rat snake that I had talked about before. They're also known as the eastern rat snake. These guys are going to be in mixed forests, pinelands, swamps, marshes, fields, any abandoned man-made areas they can be found in. They can be a variety of colors and scale patterns. They're a weakly keeled scale, so they do still have a little bit of a sheen, but it's going to have a little bit of a ridge to kind of give them more texture to be able to climb more. Um, and you can see they kind of have these like splotches in their coloration. Um, the immature snakes are gray with the darker splotches, and they can reach as adults up to about 5 feet. Um, The young eastern rat snakes, they have like a saddle pattern that you can kind of see in here also that can be mistaken for milk snakes. I'm guessing the coloration, sorry, I don't have a young one on this slide. The coloration is going to be a little bit lighter. Um, but the key identifying feature for juvenile eastern rat snakes is their white margin eyes. So they have that white margin in their eye. And then again, they got these guys are often confused with the rat snakes, but these guys are going to be a little bit more bigger bodied and they're not going to be as fast and agile as the black racer. These guys are constrictors, they're excellent swimmers and climbers. They forage in trees and on the ground. And they're going to be eating eggs, small mammals, um, sometimes small birds, lizards, snakes, and other invertebrates. And when they are feeling threatened, they're going to shake their tail up against any sort of debris on the ground to try to imitate a rattlesnake, um, which could sound pretty scary if you don't know what kind of snake it's coming from. And these will lay eggs. So this is their New York region. And it's a little blotchy because I could only get one from iNaturalist, but this is their United States region. Now we have our short head garter. This is not listed in conservation status, but it is a very limited range globally. So it's very abundant in the area that it is living in, but if anything were to happen to its environment, um, which this is pretty much just living in the Allegheny River watershed, which I'll show you a map shortly. It's a pretty small area in the world that it's living in. So these guys are in the Allegheny River watershed. It's pretty much they're hanging out in open, sunny, moist areas, edges of the forest, old fields, meadows, with a lot of herbaceous vegetation. And they're going to be hiding under any objects that they can find. They're going to be 10 to 22 inches long, so not super big. The females are going to be larger than the males. And they have these beautiful stripes on them, but they actually are missing the dark spots between the stripes, or they're going to be a lot fainter, which is a lot more common with other garter snakes. Um, these guys are going to be primarily diurnal and um, often found together. There will be multiples in one area under some sort of object, and then they're also highly terrestrial. So they're pretty much trying to stay on the ground as much as possible. Their diet includes earthworms almost exclusively, but small amphibians they could also eat. And they really rely on camouflage to be able to stay away from any predators, um, but rarely will they try to bite and then often releasing musky smells. And since they only live in such a small area, it's a little bit harder for them to get the data, but they believe them to be viviparous. So they're going to be potentially giving birth without eggs inside the mom. So this is the New York map. So you can see it's just really in the southwestern area of New York. And then this is the global map. So really concentrated just in mostly in Pennsylvania. They had introduced a small population in Ohio, but I don't have any data on how they are doing as of now. Okay, so now we have our queen snake. They're of least concerned, but they are endangered in New York and Canada. So when they talk about numbers, it's kind of like the total population versus a more specific location. These guys are going to be near clean, shallow, rocky bottom streams, creeks, rivers, and they like fast flowing water, very oxygenated water. Uh, they're pretty small and slender. They're about 15 to 24 inches long, and they have that lateral striping that's very characteristic to their species. And they're going to have keeled scales, so that gives them a little bit of a rougher appearance. Um, and their tail takes about 25% of its length, so probably about here on the snake. These guys are going to be out during the day, and they use a lot of they're going to be more of an active hunter, so they're using their all their senses to try to find whatever they can to eat. Um, but they'll be kind of solitary, hanging out over by the water to try to sunbathe. Um, they eat almost exclusively freshly molted crayfish, so it's 90 to 100% of their diet. And they will detect them by smell, so they'll be using their tongue primarily to find these crayfish. And again, when they're feeling threatened, they might musk or try to pretty much get away. And they are viviparous, so they're giving birth to live young. And then here is their New York region, and then their North American region. Okay, so now we're into venomous snakes. So when we go into venomous snakes, I want to make sure everybody knows what the differences are. So what is venomous versus poisonous? So venomous is an animal that's going to be injecting something, either bite or sting into an animal to subdue or to ingest. Poisonous is something that if I were to eat or if an animal were to eat would be causing illness or death. So there are a few different types of venom. So there's neurotoxic, chemotoxic, and cytotoxic. And snakes can possess multiple types of venom, which can vary by age, species. Individuals of the same species can also carry varied combinations of venom. So it's not necessarily one snake only carries one venom. So neurotoxic is primarily to the nervous system, can lead to paralysis or respiratory failure. Hemotoxic is primarily targeting the circulatory system, breaking down red blood cells, making it so you cannot clot, so you're going to be bleeding out. Cytotoxic is primarily destroying tissues, so necrosis is usually something that will happen during if you were to get a cytotoxic bite. So why do snakes use venom? Obviously, it helps them to capture prey. It'll help break down the prey so they can easily digest it, sometimes for defense. Um, and venoms were evolved primarily to be able to help capture prey, but it also was clearly an added benefit for defense. Um, so it's a lot of complicated, or not even that complicated reasons why the snake may need to be able to use venom to be able to help capture prey and help take care of itself. Um, so we've developed anti-venom. 1895, the French scientist Albert Calmet was able to produce antivenom by injecting a small amount of venom into a larger animal, such as horses or sheep, which stimulates their immune system. The antibodies they produce are then harvested from their blood and refined to make a serum to neutralize the toxins. So this picture down here is actually someone milking a snake, so they're getting the venom out to be able to help make the antivenom. Um, Antivenom was more widespreadly used in the 1950s um, in North America and throughout the world, um, just because of, I guess, how long it took to get to there. But 1970s, intravenous administration became a standard. Um, so often when we look at snakes, we try to be able to tell how a snake, if it is venomous, if it isn't venomous. And I'm curious to see if any of you have heard of any of these sayings or I guess different things, right? So red on yellow, kill a fellow, red on black, friend Jack. If a snake had a triangular head or an arrow-shaped head, does that mean it would be venomous? The cat eye pupil, I don't know if any of you guys have heard of that. If it has a cat eye pupil, that means it's a venomous snake, or venomous snakes are really slow and sluggish. Or the smooth scales equal non-venomous, rough scales equal venomous. So unfortunately, none of these things are true. So, red on yellow, kill a fellow, red on black, friend Jack. This only applies to North America. In other parts of the world, or even different parts of the US, sometimes you can find snakes that can have red touching black, similar to the milk snake. Sometimes they can have variations. The triangular head or arrow-shaped head, if you were listening for a lot of those snakes that we were talking about, a lot of their defense mechanisms are actually to kind of flatten out. And particularly the hognose snake will really get kind of like a wider head and will mimic that triangular shaped head or arrow shaped head. Um, the cat eye or vertical pupils isn't a great way to tell either because depending on the sunlight, if there's not a lot of sunlight, a venomous snake could have really wide pupils, or if there's a lot of sunlight, a non-venomous snake could really constrict their eyes and make more of a vertical shape. And then venomous snakes being more slow or sluggish. As we've learned before, there's some snakes that are just generally faster and going to be moving around a lot more. Um, and depending on the temperature or how much sun they've gotten, they're going to be faster or slower. And then even the smooth scales and the rough scales, we've seen quite a different few variations of snakes of the non-venomous throughout New York State that have smooth and rough scales. So unfortunately, the only real way to be able to tell if a snake is venomous is if you're very familiar with that specific um, species. Because there's also a lot of mimics in, um, as we've, seen, snakes will mimic venomous snakes. They will put out different warning signs to be able to try to tell you, like, don't touch me. Um, and generally, snakes are all just trying to stay away from us. So they're not going to be going after us or being aggressive. They just want to find their next meal. So that's why we just have to know what we're looking at, really. So into it, the timber rattlesnake. So these guys, their conservation status is threatened. They are not found on Long Island. They've been extirpated from Long Island. The last timber rattlesnake was killed around 1912 while it was sunning on the tracks in Oakdale. That was the last recorded snake that they've seen. These guys in the larger New York region, they're going to be inhabiting forests, mountainous terrains, rocky ledges, and river floodplains. And they're very large, heavy-bodied. They're pit vipers, so all of these snakes have these holes on their faces to help detect heat. And these guys are 30 to 60 inches long, and they have a very distinct tail, the rattle. Um, They have that wide triangular head, vertical pupils, and they are usually yellow-gray with a V-shaped cross bands or nearly all black. So they have these beautiful cross bands across the back of their body. They can be active day or night, but they're generally kind of coiled, sitting in the forest, kind of hiding away, waiting for their prey to go past. Um, They're going to be hunting for small mammals, mice, squirrels, and they're really using those heat detection pits on their face to be able to detect their prey. So they're just going to be kind of sitting, waiting, and watching until something comes their way. When they're threatened, typically they're going to coil up, they're going to hiss, and they're going to shake their rattle. And they don't like to bite unless they're heavily provoked or if we accidentally step on one of them. Unfortunately, that's when I feel like most people will encounter a bite. These guys are going to, they're viviparous, so they're going to be giving live birth. Um, And I thought it was really cool because these ones, a lot of snakes generally, once they're born, they're kind of out on their own. They don't see their parents, they never interact with them. But the females have been observed remaining near their offspring for about 2 weeks after birth, which is very unusual for most reptiles. And the babies will look like the adults, but they're going to be smaller, and they're only going to have actually one button on their tail. Um, so how venomous are rattlesnake or timber rattlesnakes? So these guys are highly venomous. They're a pretty significant danger to humans, with the venom being potent enough to and to be and could be fatal if untreated. Um, Populations in northern states and Appalachia populations generally have a hemotoxic venom, which destroys the blood cells and tissue. Southern populations are going to be more neurotoxic. Um, Obviously, a bite from a timber rattlesnake is always going to need a medical emergency. You're going to have to go to the closest hospital as soon as possible. Um, and then just shortly, my coworker, she had went up to the Lake George region, and she was actually kayaking and she heard a rattle while she was kayaking. These guys can swim really well, so they'll be swimming around every once in a while. So just be careful with your paddle so you don't accidentally hit a timber rattlesnake. So these guys, where they are in New York, and their current range and their historic range. So you can even see where they used to be here on Long Island. Um, so their range used to be a little bit bigger. It's not so big anymore. So our northern copperhead, these guys are not found on Long Island. Um, they're generally classified as a species of least concern. But they're threatened at the edge of their range. So Massachusetts, they're endangered, and New York and New Jersey, they're going to be a species of special concern. Um, they prefer to be in areas with heavy leaf litter, commonly found on hillsides, wetlands, with lots of woody debris. Um, they really thrive in forests and in edge habitats, and then they can kind of cohabitate in human developments. So these guys are a pretty stout-bodied pit viper again, so they have those pits on their face to be able to help detect prey. Typically 24 to 36 inches long. And they're recognized by like copper coloration. Um, and they're dark brown or chestnut hourglass crossbands with that light tan pink body. And yes, I'm sorry, I was gonna leave questions to the end. None of the venomous snakes are on Long Island. At the beginning, I did say for sure all the venomous snakes are not on Long Island. Um, so the younger ones are gonna be um the younger copperheads are pretty cool looking. I do have a slide of them. They actually will have a yellow tail tip to be able to help attract prey. So these guys are very shy and docile. Um, and when they're young, they have a luring technique that they're able to use their tail to be able to help help lure prey over to them. So young copperheads eat mostly insects, usually caterpillars, adults mostly mice, small birds, lizards, small snakes, amphibians, and they're ambush hunters, so they're going to be sitting and waiting. And their primary defense mechanism is to stay still, relying on their camouflage. Um, to avoid any detection. Um, and most bites will happen, unfortunately, when people accidentally step on them because they are so good at camouflaging. Let me just show you guys. This is the youth with the yellow tail tip, the juvenile. And then the adult has a darker, so they'll lose all that coloration in the tail as they age. Um, so Again, how venomous are these snakes? So these guys, relative to other venomous snakes, it's more mild compared to other pit vipers. Um, it's still considered, dangerous. It's primarily a hemotoxic and cytotoxic, causing localized tissue damage and intense pain, because it's breaking down the red blood cells. Um, while it's considered the weakest venom in North American pit vipers, it's still very significant. Obviously, always going to get medical help as soon as possible. So, their range in New York, none on Long Island. They're just kind of in like um up up there, upstate. And then the US range. It's gonna be the tan. And then we have our Eastern Massasauga. These guys, again, not found on Long Island. These guys are threatened in every state except for their special concern in Michigan. Um, The threats are habitat loss, wetland drainage, development, and high rates of human persecution, unfortunately. These guys are generally in the wetlands and upland highlands and Great Lakes region. They require damp and low-lying areas for hibernation, but they will often be in sunny fields or kind of foraging in there. They require a lot of mixed habitat. So they do require a little bit of extra care. But they can be found in bogs, ferns, swamps, marshes, and during the spring and fall, they'll migrate to the drier forests and fields. They're small, very thick-bodied. Again, that pit viper, they're about 18 to 30 inches long with a gray to light brown body and those splotches down the back and sides. And they do have that rattle. They're pretty shy and non-aggressive. They're, again, sit and wait predators, so they're going to remaining in one spot for a long period of time to be able to avoid any sort of detection and to be able to sense and be able to get their prey. And they're going to be eating small mammals such as, moles, mice, shrews, and potentially some small birds and frogs. Um, but the young Massasaugas are going to be more dependent on cold-blooded prey, somewhere amphibians and frogs. Um, Again, how venomous. So the venom for a Eastern Massasauga is complex, it's potent, it's cytotoxic and hemotoxic mixed together. So it's immobilizing the prey by destroying the tissues. But while it's highly potent, they only will they use very small venom yields on their prey. So fatalities in humans are rare. There's still potentials. So again, prompt medical treatment if you were to ever encounter a snake and get bit. Especially if you don't know what kind of snake it is. It's always 100% best to just get it checked, make sure you're okay. So this is the New York region. So we're really not finding them too much in New York. And then this is the United States. So even a pretty small section in the United States. Okay. So now that we've met all of our snakes of New York, and now that we've met our venomous snakes of New York, some venom misconceptions. So a lot of times people will hear or may have heard in the past that you can suck out the poison, or if you applied a tourniquet to kind of stop the blood flow. Um, Unfortunately, the venom travels really fast through the bloodstream. It's too quick to be able to either suck out, or if you apply a tourniquet, unfortunately, you're just going to be localizing that venom to one area and probably causing more damage to that one area versus just letting it kind of take its course, going to the hospital, getting the anti-venom. Um, Using ice or electric shock. I haven't heard of this one until I just kind of did some research on these things. Unfortunately, do not do anything to be able to help with any venomous snake bites. Killing the snake for identification. It's going to be taking way too much time out of your precious time that you need to go get medical help. If you could take a quick picture just for identification. If not, they're going to be using a pretty wide range antivenom to be able to cover all their bases on any snake bite. Another misconception is only adult snakes are dangerous. Um, Unfortunately, or fortunately not true, all venomous snakes are going to have venom throughout their life. Younger snakes may have different venom than the adult snakes. It may or not be, have more side effects or not, but all snakes are going to have, all poisonous snakes, young or old, are going to have venom. And then all bites are wet or lethal bites. So venomous snakes do have the capacity to be able to strike without letting out any venom. Um, this is because they may not want to actually subdue you. They're also trying to conserve as much venom as they can for the food that they need to eat. It costs them, it's a pretty substantial thing for them to have to be able to create the venom, and to use it on just anything is kind of a waste of venom for them. So there are people that have gotten bit, gone to the hospital, and fortunately haven't had any sort of um, any venom in them to be able to treat them, but they had gotten a dry bite. And then that snakes are aggressive and venomous or not venomous, snakes usually are really just trying to keep to themselves or just go about their day in the best way they can. And they're really not actively going after any people. They're generally just trying to either find a sunny spot to hang out or hide under something to just kind of keep away. So, some snakes we may encounter in the wild that do not actually live here. Unfortunately, some people will buy snakes and release them, or um, sometimes they escape. So some snakes that could potentially be around, hopefully not, or you might just find your friends having a snake at home. I have pictured a ball python. So left to right on this front, the top is ball python, corn snake, and a hognose snake. So you can keep a western hognose snake here in New York as a pet. This is a California king snake here on the bottom, and I'm not sure if any of you guys heard the news story of the 14-foot reticulated python that was found outside. I think it was like a year or two ago. Um, so unfortunately, this one is deceased because it was out during the cold. We're not really sure how it got out there. And this is not a common pet, but some people will be able to obtain. It's an dangerous animal permit that you would need to be able to own one as a pet. And then the last one over here is a milk snake. So, why should we care about snakes? I think the biggest one that a lot of people can join with is they help keep down pests. We've learned that they can eat a lot of things that either will eat our food cause disease, mice, rats, or slugs, insects, and other things that we want out of our gardens usually. They will be able to help keep the ecosystem balanced. And they're the most natural way to be able to get rid of these things without using any sort of pesticides, herbicides, or other things in our environment. So, besides that, if you want to think about the venomous snakes and why should we care about them, snake venom has been studied and mimicked to help make medications. So Caprit I'm going to have a hard time. I'm sorry, guys. Capritil is used to treat high blood pressure and heart failure. Um, and many other drugs are helping with clotting um, and making coagulants to um, help cardiovascular diseases throughout um, throughout the time that they've been studying it. And it's a pretty critical ingredient in the traditional method of making, again, the anti-venom. We wouldn't be able to survive a snake bite if we didn't learn how to study it and make the anti-venom from it. Um, the future in medicine, it's again working for cardiovascular diseases, pain management, cancer treatment. Certain peptides and venom show toxicity towards cancer cells, making it a promising candidate. Antimicrobial agents in the venom can help, um, again, keep us making more solutions for antibiotic resistance, and then the antivenom production again. So this is a very interesting diagram. I just wanted to throw it up here quick, but basically just like how the extraction, they end up breaking it down, seeing what they can get out of the venom and what kind of pharmaceutical effects they can get from the venom, and then some of the drugs that we were able to make, and then also the future of some medications that we'll be able to make from it. And then also snakes and medicine, the rod of As Asclepius. I'm sorry, guys, I didn't take Greek. And the caduceus. Um, these are both symbols that we see often. So they're just kind of in history and Greek history showing that, it is symbolizing medicine and rejuvenation. The catesis is actually it was originally for commerce, speed, and negotiation, but the U.S. Army Medical Corps kind of misjudged it. They used it for it, but we still love it, right? It's a cool symbol. And then, okay, what do we do if we find a snake? So if you found one in your yard or your porch, generally they're really just trying to find a way. So they're not going to go up and try to attack us. They're just kind of trying to find any sort of food. So as long as we give them plenty of space, they're going to try to leave on their own once they found what they needed and then kind of work their way out. If they got trapped in a windowsill or a well or a trash can, if you just stick something in there to try to let them climb out, you don't really need to touch it, or you can always put the trash can over so they can just get out on their own. If we're in a swimming pool, just use the pull net to gently lift it out and place it on the side. And they could drown if some of them are left too long. Not all of them are really great swimmers. We did learn that a few are, but some of them will need assistance to be able to get out of the pool. And again, if they're a baby snake, as I said before, they're independent from birth, unlike a lot of other animals. So they're really just going on their way, finding their own food on their own. But if they're injured or sick, you can always contact local wildlife rescue. So if you're here on the eastern end of Long Island, the Evelyn Alexander Wildlife Rescue, they are a great resource, and that's actually where I got their wonderful list of how to help snakes if you find them. So, but you can always call us if you had any questions, and we can always get you to the right source. So. So this is one of those sources that we actually have linked on our website. And if for whatever reason Evelyn Alexander or where you are doesn't have the means to be able to get to or help with that specific animal, the DEC has a way to get in contact with the closest rehabilitator near you. And then how do we help snakes? We don't want to kill snakes. It's illegal to kill snakes. And they're beneficial. They're not dangerous, so we don't want to hurt them. We can plant native plants to help restore their natural habitats. If we drive carefully, we don't want to hit them because they do try to cross the road every once in a while, and fatalities are common on roads. We want to avoid any harmful chemicals. I was saying if we're spraying herbicides and pesticides and rodenticides, um, snakes will get that through the food chain, whether they're rubbing their bodies up against it or if they're eating any sort of insects or rodents that have been affected by the pesticides or herbicides. Um, it could be pretty bad for them. And then if we reduce waste, we want to clean up after ourselves. Any of that stuff could really trap or injure wildlife. So we just have to pick up our trash. So we've made it. Do you guys have any questions for me or about snakes? I have some from earlier. Let me just go through them. Do any have considerably infectious non-venomous bites? Any bite is um, if you don't get it treated or if you don't clean it properly, could any sort of like scratch or bite could potentially cause an infection, but there's none that's like more than others. And um, some can definitely climb trees um, in search of food, yes. And they are all carnivores, absolutely. Are most animals able to sense a venomous or poisonous snake? So they will sometimes have different colorations, but as we saw, some of the venomous snakes that are here in New York are actually really trying to evade any detection. So they're trying to camouflage as much as possible. And a lot of the snakes that weren't venomous had those bright colors to be able to try to tell everybody to get away. So it really depends on the species, but I don't know if animals would be able to sense if they're venomous or poisonous. Thank you guys so much for joining me tonight. And and from Teddy Smith, are king cobras venomous? King cobras, I believe. Let me just look it up really fast for you because I don't want to. It's actually the longest venomous snake, so up to 18 feet long. So yes, they are venomous, but fortunately we don't have them here. So all right, guys. Thank you again so much. If you guys ever have any other questions or any help needing with snakes or any other animals, you can always feel free to give us a call, and we're more than happy to help you. All right, guys. I hope you all have a wonderful night, and we hope to see you soon.